All right. I am going to be talking about how to sell into Medicare Advantage. And we're going to start with some of the beginning things about what Medicare Advantage is so you can really understand how this program works at all. I know a lot of people that are here are selling into employers and are interested in moving into the Medicare Advantage sector, which can be a challenging market to navigate. So we'll start with some of the basics, and then I'll get into some details about how it works and what are the opportunities. So before I get started, our company is Circle. We work with health plans, providers, supplemental benefit companies to grow and retain their members' patients. And we sell a suite of products that help to facilitate that growth. And we are looking for startups in the sector that want to participate in growing their businesses with us. So just to get started, what is Medicare Advantage? So Medicare is a program that is for the 65 plus population and people with chronic illnesses, specific chronic illnesses. People often get confused about what Medicare Advantage is compared to what Medicare itself is. So Medicare is a program run by CMS, by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Medicare Advantage is a subset of the Medicare program. Medicare is working with private health insurance companies, names that you know, like Aetna, Cigna, companies like that. And those companies are providing insurance coverage to people who are 65 plus. And it's a managed care program. So what that means is that the government is paying them on a monthly basis, a certain amount per member, to manage the care of those individuals. On top of the overarching Medicare Advantage program, there are a couple subset groups that are important to note that have specific opportunities for people that are trying to enter the Medicare sector. One of those is the special needs plans, or SNPs is what they're called. There are about 6 million people that are in those types of programs. Those are for people who are often both low income and have chronic illnesses, and are 65 plus. Some of those programs are just for chronic illness and for N65 plus. Important to note that they have a larger budget than some of the other Medicare Advantage plans. There are also employer group Medicare Advantage plans. It's definitely a much smaller group, but they have different dynamics to their budgeting, and so I wanted to just note that as well. So if you want to sell into Medicare Advantage, the key is to understand how their budgeting works and what are the economics of a Medicare Advantage plan. If you don't understand that, it's going to feel like you're hitting your head against the wall, and you're going to face a lot of challenges. So before we begin to dig into that, Medicare Advantage plans on average operate with like a 1 to 3% profit margin. So you hear these big names, United Health Group, doing hundreds of billions of dollars a year, but their profit margins are really slim. And that's partially because 85% of their spend has to go towards actual care. Or the improvement of the quality of care. That means they're spending money on providers, on services that can be billed with a CPT code and are in that category. A lot of groups that are here are likely trying to get into that portion of the budget by serving members with some kind of health improvement product. The other portion of the budget is their admin budget, and everything that goes into running a plan squeezes into that 15%. So it's a much more challenging budget to sell into. So if you're selling something that's an infrastructure type of product, it can be more challenging, but there is a lot of opportunity there as well. So a few other things that are really critical to know when you're selling into the plan. The way that they determine what they're going to roll out the next year is what is called the bid. And every year they have to report to CMS, hey, here's what we're including this year. We're going to have this type of a dental benefit, and we're going to cover these types of supplemental benefits. They usually don't name those companies by name that they're working with, but it's going to describe what it is that they're going to be providing in the next year. So this is really important if you're selling into a Medicare plan. If you want to be successful in having your product, you have to make sure ahead of time that you're in the bid, which means selling at the right times of year is really critical. It's different on the admin side. There's different times of year where things get sold for that portion of the budget, but that's a very important piece to know. The other two parts of the business of Medicare Advantage that are critical to know if you're trying to sell into them is the quality bonus. So we'll get into this a little bit more, but basically what CMS has set up is that if you, as a health plan, hit certain benchmarks, like these could be, and they're very specific, and you can look these up on CMS on their data.gov site. There are specific benchmarks around things like have enough of your population picked up their insulin, or have they taken their statin. So they're really specific benchmarks. So if you, as a company, have the ability to influence any of those ratings, that is a huge benefit financially to the Medicare Advantage plans. The other portion that people talk a lot about is risk adjustment. And what that means is, you turn 65, you get onto a Medicare Advantage plan, the government may be sending to that Medicare Advantage plan, let's say $1,200 a month. In the early part of the year, the plan is trying to determine whether or not you have other chronic conditions, other health problems. They document that through a visit that they have with you. If you do have other challenges, they're able to bill the government a higher rate. And that higher rate is around risk adjustment. That's what they're talking about there. There's been a lot of controversy around this over the last year. A lot of companies that were risk adjusting too much. So there's been a little bit of sort of trying to bring that back to some normalcy. So if you are going after the risk adjustment space, there are a lot of AI companies that I see trying to enter that space. It's really important that you're paying attention to the compliance in that sector if you want to stick around and not get regulated out of business. So for the SNP plans, I mentioned that the regular Medicare Advantage plan is operating with like a 1% to 3% budget. They operate with a much higher budget. They get paid more for the government for supporting this population. So D-SNPs are about 6%. So they have a lot more money to be working with. So it's and this is a population that really needs a lot of help, and it's a growing part of the Medicare Advantage program. And I highly encourage people, if they're entering into Medicare Advantage, to possibly focus in on this portion of a Medicare Advantage rather than trying to go broad and provide a solution across the entire sector. So I wanted, before we, to get into a few of the things that you may not hear directly from a health plan. So these are kind of, over the course of the last couple of years, things that we've figured out that are little hints for entering into this sector. So first thing, if your product is not directly tied to revenue growth, and that revenue growth can be through risk adjustment, like I said, through their quality bonus score, or just by getting new members in the door, it's really, really challenging for you to make a sale in the Medicare Advantage section. Like I said, if you're in the admin budget, it can be really challenging. It's not that impossible, but you're displacing companies that have been there for a very long time. So you have to get a lot of established credibility for them to displace a company that's been around for 20, 30 years. The Medicare Advantage plans are one of the most siloed businesses that I have seen. And also, if you've been selling into the commercial insurance sector and you're trying to move into Medicare Advantage, let's say you've been selling into Aetna on the commercial side. Aetna Commercial does not talk to Aetna Medicare Advantage. It's a whole new sale to move into that market. And it's really important to understand which business unit you're selling into, because the business units themselves are held to different standards. So if you work in the risk adjustment portion of the business, you're not really paying attention to growth, what's happening in the sales department. So understanding what is your customer profile and how that what is motivating that customer to purchase is really critical. We get approached a lot from companies that are saying, "Hey, can you introduce me to somebody at Cigna?" Which we can do, but if it's not the right portion of the business, it's really not going to get you very far. Another really important thing to know about Medicare Advantage is that a member is not profitable for a health plan for somewhere between 3 to 4 years. So there are a lot of things that a health plan doesn't invest in because they're concerned about churn. And it takes a long time to prove out that you can affect churn in any meaningful way. So it can be really confusing. Like, why aren't the plans adopting this product? It's going to help all of their members. But if it's something where the data is going to take a long time for you to see success, it's more challenging for a Medicare Advantage plan to adopt that product. I often see people who get an MSA, a master service agreement, with a large health plan, and they think, "Oh, great, I've made it. Like, I've got Aetna, and I'm good to go." That's usually just a license to hunt. At that point, it's on you as a company to look at how you can grow within that health plan. Pilots are kind of a controversial thing. A lot of times, if a Medicare Advantage plan is saying, "Let's pilot," it means that the person you're talking to doesn't actually have budget authority to run something that's much larger. Not always. Sometimes the pilots are like, "We really do want to prove this out in a region and then take it nationally." But if it's like, "Sure, we'll do this, but we're not going to get any skin in the game," just be really wary of that. A lot of supplemental benefits get sold to Medicare Advantage plans, and then the plan doesn't market them at all. And people are really confused. Like, why is the plan not helping me to expand my user base? Reason for that often is a lot of the plans are not actually intending for there to be large adoption of the product. That's shifting somewhat in this year. CMS is trying to encourage plans to make sure that people are using the benefits. But it is still something to be aware of, that if a plan is not promoting your product, there's a reason for it. It's not just happenstance. So health plans, the people that work in the Medicare space, they move from plan to plan a lot. And it's critical to be building relationships with individuals. Your person, you meet somebody, Jen Smith at Cigna, and she's a champion for your product. She thinks you're fantastic. The chances of Jen Smith staying at Cigna for 2 years plus is actually pretty low, but you want to build a relationship with that individual so wherever she lands, you can continue to sort of have her promote your product wherever she lands. It's very often that the lower level people at a Medicare Advantage plan can get really excited and see your product and solution could solve their problem. It's very rare that that person also has budget authority to actually issue an RFP or to get senior management on board. Ideally, you're looking at what are the major challenges of the organization from the top down and getting buy-in from as high up as possible if you really want to be successful in expanding out. Calculating your ROI, it's hard and it can be really confusing to do. One of the ways you can do that is by working with an actuary. It's expensive, but it's very worth it. Yes, actuaries all the way. So that's one thing that it's like, if you can show within this calendar year, I understand the mechanics of a Medicare Advantage plan and I can affect your revenue in XYZ ways, the likelihood of adoption is way higher. As I mentioned, razor thin margins, we hear these massive dollars, but if you're coming in at too high of a price point, all they're hearing is like, it's going to cost me $1 million to adopt and roll this out, and if you're not saving me far more than that, it's going to be challenging for me to adopt you. We found when we approach Medicare Advantage plans that a lot of them, they use it almost as a litmus test. If you say to them, don't worry, we can connect with your API, or don't worry, we just need XYZ data, those are good ways to just shut the conversation down, which seems crazy, but a lot of the plans, the integrations are going to happen with like an SFTP server type of situation, and it's very challenging for them to get data to you. So as much as possible, keep your options open about how you're transferring data and what kind of data you really need from the plan to get started. Ideally, you're asking for very little in terms of data, and you're open to any type of integration point. And two last things. Technology teams internally at a health plan are often really strapped, spread very thin. If your solution is not providing really solid customer support on the integration side, it's going to be very difficult for you to maintain a relationship with that plan. So that's something to keep in mind. Last thing, regulations in the Medicare Advantage sector change every single year. Those changes affect the businesses that are trying to work with plans. And if you're not keeping ahead of the trend of where CMS is heading, the likelihood of you getting regulated out of business is decently high. But if you can remain agile and pay attention to where the regulation winds are going, then you can usually ride that wave rather than being sort of caught underneath the wave. So a couple of things of ways that you can drive their budget. So as I mentioned with the bid, the CMS releases what's like this benchmark of like, okay, here's how much we think it's going to cost to cover this individual. They're submitting a bid back to the government. Usually it's below that benchmark. They're able to retain some of that revenue and reinvest that back into the plan and into care for the beneficiary. That's a place where you really need to be paying attention if you can affect that part of the business. Risk score, 1% increase in the risk score is going to be a 1% increase in revenue for a Medicare Advantage plan. Again, a lot of regulatory changes in that area, so be careful, but it is a space where, if done properly, you can really help a plan from a financial perspective. And I mentioned about the quality bonus, the STARS rating is how you might have heard of this. So for an MA plan, they're getting scored every year, and there's a 2-year lag time on this. But the main point of this is if you get a 4-star or higher, you're going to be getting a 5% bonus on top of, we talked about the 1% to 3% profit margins. 5% bonus is a lot of money for them. There are counties that they work in that are more challenging counties. These often are in rural areas. That it's a 10% bonus if you can get them up to that 4-star level. So that is a place where, but they know if something is like not really going to help them or it's going to take too long to help them to hit those scores. So you need to be really clear, like we're talking about this specific measure and how we can affect that specific measure. And you don't have to promise the world. They're not looking for a company to come in and say, we're going to improve this by 90%. They don't believe you. But if you can improve it marginally, there's a lot of money for them in that. And that's just, people ask me a lot, well, how do I know which of the measures that I'm hitting? All of this data is publicly available. You can go down to the plan level and figure out exactly where they're struggling. Like, are they struggling on getting patients to come in for their annual wellness visit? Are they struggling on some type of administrative portion of the business? So use that data. Don't just let it sit there because they're providing it for companies. This is again just to show the impact that the star rating can have on a health plan's revenue. So same business. So you see membership across the board is about 138,000, but at the different star ratings amount and how much more they're getting. So like they're getting an increase of 91 million for this population size just by being at the 4.5 star level. That's a lot of money. So a couple of other growth levers for a plan. This is something I would say, look this up and use this guide. It's put out by Deloitte. These are areas where it's like, on the opportunity side, these are things that they're hopeful of addressing. The areas that are the priorities are things that they know every year they need to address. It's obviously ideal if you're in we know you need to address this portion of the business. So just a little bit about the timing of what happens in the year. Because you can't just sell at any point of time in the year. There are different points of time in the year where they're making decisions about different things and they're paying attention to different things. And they are incredibly distracted about the thing that they are paying attention to in that point of time in the year. So in the beginning of the year is when they are like assessing how they did last year, really digging into their strategic goals, doing budget planning for the next fiscal, this is from October to December, budget planning for the next fiscal year. This is also open enrollment period, so a good portion of the business is going to be very distracted with open enrollment and will not pay any attention to anything that you're telling them. So you'll want to have already been in conversations with them long before that October to December window, where you are being thought of as they're thinking about the strategic plan and the budgeting. That's not the time to say like, oh, we're going to introduce ourselves for the first time to this plan. But their sort of thinking starts in that October to December time period. From January to June, they're reviewing, they're making adjustments for their medical loss ratio, and they're finalizing their benefit design for the next year. That is a time period that is ideal for you to try to engage with an MA plan. They're the most interested in talking to new vendors in that window of time. And ideally, January 1, you're ready to go with messaging out to a Medicare Advantage plan. Vendor selection happens during the same time period, depending on the product. That can be ongoing, but really January to March is when a lot of the decisions are made, with the idea of rollout happening, like integrations happening between April to June, rollouts for a lot of these products during open enrollment. So that's kind of the cycle annually of what's going on with the health plan. All right, so last couple of things. Where do I find my buyers? They are usually not at conferences like this. They're going to tend to be more at conferences that are really industry specific. RISE conferences are a good one, but there are different ones that are state, like health plan conferences that are really good ones. Obviously, if you go to one of these conferences, you'll notice that vendors make up a very small percentage of the people there. That's usually a good indicator that this is a better type of, for selling, is a better type of conference to be attending. Meeting people face-to-face is really important. This is very relationship-driven. Your reputation really matters, and people will begin to talk about you in these circles, and so you need to be introducing yourself in those areas. A couple of other ways, some people work with group purchasing organizations or associations. This can be groups like Blue Cross Blue Shield Association that works to promote products across all of the blues. So that's another possible way. And again, I cannot stress enough how critical it is to understand which business unit you're selling into, and not to think like I'm just selling into MA. That's not the way you need to be thinking about it. You need to be thinking about, I'm selling into quality to address these types of issues, or I'm selling into sales to address these types of issues. If you try to do this broad brush, it's going to be very challenging to get any headway. In terms of how much you can charge, these are obviously like this changes every year, right? But this is just to give like a really broad brush. The amount like per member per month goes up in how much you can bill when it is more clinical. The numbers, if you are just a digital platform that is providing better member experience, for instance, that could be 25 cents, 10 cents per member per month. So if you come in and you're not within the range of what they think is going to be the acceptable range, it's a really easy way to turn them completely off. And so I would say as a guide to think about this is one way to think about it. It changes plan by plan. If a plan is struggling in a certain area, they're going to be possibly spending more to solve that problem. Again, remember the 10% bonus counties. If you're focusing on a county that's a double bonus county, there's also more interest in spending a little bit more in those areas. So just got a few minutes left. So a summary risk score adjustment, that's an area where you can really improve for the per member per month. If you are increasing their revenue by about 1%, like for every 1% increase, you can be charging around $5 or so. Honing in on where you can affect the star ratings is really critical, and decreasing costs, they are interested in that. It's hard for them to believe that you can do that. So you really need to be able to prove that out ahead of time. I've been asked before, how many people do I need to have go through my program for me to have proved this out? In general, if you've run something with about 1,000 people, there's going to be an assumption that you've collected enough data for them to believe that like you're onto something. If it's below that number, it's a little bit more challenging for them to believe that you've got enough data to support your product. What you are selling to a health plan is going to affect that health plan's revenue at different points in time. So there's some products that you sell that affect them in this plan year, and there's some products that you sell that are not going to affect them for a couple of years in the future in terms of their revenue. You really need to know which type of product you are. And again, this goes back to understanding the business unit, understanding, are you affecting quality? Are you affecting risk scores? Are you affecting new membership? Are you affecting retention? And understand where that falls into where that's going to actually hit their revenue. Because the way that you're pitching them will change based on when they're going to realize that revenue. So that's just about time. If anybody has any questions, our booth is right over there. I'm always happy to talk to people about the nuances of selling into Medicare Marketplace or Medicaid plans. And find us online at circleengage.ai. It's been great to talk to you all.